Thanks, Sean, and thanks, everyone. I think we didn't do the bit where you say why you wanted to be in the session. So I don't know if we're going to do this after, but I can say why I wanted to be. So I'm a member of a workers' co-op and also an organizer and a co-founder of Cooperation Town, which is a network of community food co-ops, which started in 2019. So it's kind of pushing it to the 2-year mark. It was the end of 2019, and it actually started from an idea and from a frustration maybe with the sort of activism that I was involved with at the time, or you know, in the years before that, sort of some education activism, some street activism, but nothing that was actually building foundations in the communities that we live in. And in particular, it was a lot about sort of fighting against things, fighting the fascists, fighting, you know, racist formations, fighting violence against women and so on. And I was kind of looking for a way to maybe develop action in our communities where we live with our neighbors before we have to fight each other. So kind of what are the things that we can do together and find those, you know, develop a politics of sharing through action rather than at the point of conflict when we have to fight each other. And sort of the idea came like it was there was this kind of eureka moment, and the idea of food co-ops, of a network of food co-ops where people self-organize in our communities. So, you know, with our neighbors, with people that we maybe know a little bit, that maybe we share some things with. For example, I don't know, our kids might go to the same school, or we live on the same street or on the same estate, and maybe we face similar problems. Maybe our estate is threatened by demolition, or things like this that we encounter locally. But maybe we don't share lots of other things. You know, people might come from different backgrounds, that speak different languages, have like different life stories. But what we do know is everyone needs to eat, and that organizing around food is a very non-controversial, very accessible way to think about organizing together. So while this is a network of food co-ops, and a lot of it is to do with how we, you know, we produce, source, consume, distribute food, really what it is about, or for me anyway, is about learning to organize with our neighbors, so that once those problems, you know, do kind of become a reality, maybe the estate is going to be demolished, or the local GP is closing down, or somebody's being evicted, we already know how to organize with each other. And obviously the format, or the set of principles around which we organize are the cooperative principles. So in late 2019, we started the first food co-op on a small estate in Kentish Town, which is in North London. 20 household neighbors came together, decided that they want to be part of the co-op, made some decisions about how they're going to decide what comes next, decided how much they want to pay, how often they want to organize, and we kind of launched a network with a single co-op. Then came COVID. We won't get into that. Obviously, that messed up everything for loads of people, probably more than us. But it meant that sort of coming together with your neighbors was just a bit more difficult. We have since sort of relaunched the network. We've produced this guide. It's I don't know if it looks backwards on my screen, but it says Cooperation Town Starter Pack, which is basically a very simple, as accessible as we could make it, step-by-step guide to setting up a food co-op on your street, which means that anyone can do it. You don't have to be a professional organizer or a community worker or somebody with any experience around food distribution or handling or whatever. It explains the different roles in the co-op. There aren't a huge amount of roles, but everyone does something because it is obviously following the cooperative structure. So all the members own the co-op, everyone is doing something. There is a very clear structure where members depend on each other for this project to be successful. There are some tips and advice and sort of troubleshooting, like, you know, I don't know, hints about how to run meetings, about, you know, they're all suggestions, obviously, where to get the food from, how to solve problems if there's a conflict in the group, how to distribute, how often, how to set up an account, all those things. They're all very practical kind of suggestions. Obviously, members don't have to follow them, but the groups themselves will decide. And what happens is that groups up and down the country, maybe they hear about us, I don't know, they read an article or somebody told them, or they found out online, and they come together with their neighbors and they set up an autonomous, you know, local co-op on one street or one estate, or maybe it's a small village. And again, there are 20 members. They kind of usually follow the advice or the suggestions in the pack. The day-to-day running of community food co-ops is very simple. Anyone who's been in a co-op kind of probably understands the very basics of sort of their members. You have to recruit them, you have to support them. There's a treasurer who would be collecting money, although that's normally done sort of online. There's somebody who's responsible for, you know, listing the members. And then there is the sort of the practicalities of where do we get the food from? So half of it is food that is, or probably less than half, food that is bought in bulk. So the members pool their money together, and that can be £5 per household, it can be £3, it can be a tenner. You know, each co-op will decide, and that normally depends on the, you know, family sizes usually. And then they would go to the local wholesaler, or maybe develop a relationship with a store holder in the market. That's what we did in North London, and buy in bulk the sort of the things that everyone agree on. So in the pack there is a kind of template shopping list. How do we decide together what food to buy with our neighbors? You know, we don't necessarily eat the same things every day, but we do. You know, most people have sort of the list of staples that they always have in their cupboards, right? The pasta and the rice and the eggs and whatever. So obviously these are the products that the co-op purchases in bulk. If you particularly like a very, very specialized type of ice cream, you're probably going to go to the shop and get it yourself, which is completely fine. You know, the co-op doesn't need to buy it for you. The rest of the food for the food co-ops come from supermarket surplus. So we know that there is an absolute huge amount of overproduction that's designed into the system, because, you know, the supermarkets obviously put their own profit before, like, yeah, the welfare of the producers. So there's just a shit ton of, of surplus that kind of finds its way into the big organizations like Fair Share and the Felix Project in London and City Harvest and a few others, that then distributed out to food banks mostly, or to churches or to schools, where people usually come and sort of, you know, are given food in the context of charity. What we're saying, we can divert some of this food into food co-ops where people actually make a decision themselves about what to get and how to organize. So they're no longer charity recipients, they are organizers in their own community. So these are the two sources of food. Then the co-op will, you know, get it all into one place, pack it into usually identical sort of boxes or bags, however they're organized. Then there'll be some negotiation, you know, maybe we have 23 whatever cabbages, but only 20 members. What do we do around this? This seems like a very, very small thing to negotiate, but actually it's a political question, right? Like, how do we decide what do we do with the, you know, with the surplus that we have? Mostly the groups would say, you know, who's got the biggest family? You get the extra cabbage. My kids don't eat cabbage. Can I swap it for apples? These kind of negotiations that we have in, you know, with our neighbors, yeah, again, this is how we practice organizing on a really, really small scale where there's like literally no risk. You know, if the co-op made a terrible mistake and ordered the wrong kind of potato, it's probably okay. You know, people would learn to organize and negotiate for next week, and it will be better. So again, low risk, kind of something that everyone can relate to, and a really kind of organizing practice. I mean, I don't know, maybe we can talk later. I mean, you can ask me, feel free, about the sort of the politics behind it and why we decide to organize in that way. But what I want to say is that we have, so at the moment there are, I think, 11 or 12 co-ops in our network. They're completely autonomous. They don't necessarily even, you know, I've never met some of those people. There's people in Lincolnshire that I have never met, who are part of the co-op. They do their own thing. They've taken whatever they thought was useful from the pack, from our conversations, from other resources that we created, and they design their own co-ops because they are the members, and obviously they own their own co-op. We don't tell them what to do. We just there to support them. There are some co-ops that are in our network that are in London, that are near to where we are, and we support them more directly. We also kind of semi-confederated them in a sense that we have our own space, as in Corporation Town headquarters, from which we can distribute more food to the local co-op. So again, reducing the cost even further because we can purchase it in kind of even bigger quantities and so on. So creating an economy of scale. Yes, I'm trying to think. Sort of, I think it would be more useful and more and kind of, you know, maybe more engaging if people wanted to know specific things about how we run it. The idea is that, of course, each one of you goes home and start a food co-op on your street. So, you know, we will support you in doing this. We do have some training that we're looking to start again now that COVID is not such a big problem, I think. I don't know. We can send you the packs. We can send you sort of all the different templates. They're also on our website, which is called cooperation.town. So various templates that you can download. You can, you know, there are flyers there, for example, like this, which you can use when you go door knocking on your estate or on your street, like, you know, how to start a conversation. Putting a flyer through somebody's door is not going to turn them into a co-op member, I can guarantee that. There has to be a conversation. You know, but lots of co-op starts from an event, which kind of shows people the kind of foods that you can get for completely free, which is mind-blowing because it's excellent food that is otherwise considered to be waste. Thanks, Sean. And yeah, and then what sort of the next stage, once you have spoken to 10 neighbors, or maybe you and another neighbor, or maybe somebody who goes to your football club or to your church or whatever kind of group activity that you might be attending. You know, if you spoke to some people, you know, they would know somebody else who would find this useful. Send them and ask them to speak to that person. Once you have 10 people in the room, you know, we can start the process of organizing. And once you have 20 members, once you're ready to go, Corporation Town, us, sort of the workers co-op, we would support you with a very small amount of seed funding with £100, which you can use to do a bigger event or to print some flyers or to maybe buy the first, you know, batch of foods that you can distribute, so that you always, you know, members pay forward. And you know, we will support you throughout, but you're pretty much autonomous. You're part of a network, but you make your own decisions in your group. I think maybe one last thing. Have I got time for one last thing, Sean?
Loads of time.
Oh, have I? Damn, I speak too fast. Okay, so an important thing is that the idea of working with our neighbors, you know, it's great that we get cheap food or cheaper food, you know, and that we get to kind of create sort of local distribution infrastructure around food. But like I said, you know, the key thing is that we learn to organize. And when we started Cooperation Town, there was this idea, it was an abstract idea that, you know, it must turn into something else. Like those organizing skills, they will, you know, they will filter into other forms of kind of social interactions or issues that we think about. And we were right. And a few months ago, I can't remember now when, one of our co-ops, one of the co-ops in our network in Waltham Forest in London, you know, faced a completely different problem. It wasn't around food. One of the members, a woman and her 3 children, were going to be evicted from their home. Classic London, you know, gentrification hell. The landlord was going to literally put them on the street. And this member is not a political organizer, has never read any of the books that, you know, maybe in other circles, you know, people at least heard of, never spoke in public, you know, all those kind of things. She just needed cheap food. I mean, that's why she joined the co-op. But her co-op members came together to support her in you know, in her situation, in her housing situation. And within days, there was an eviction resistance planned. And I was there on the day. I had to see it. There were about 70 people outside our house, and the bailiffs were stopped. And, you know, the entire street and the neighborhood came to her support. So it kind of worked, you know. It's and we could demonstrate that the link from organizing about something so accessible can lead to organizing about something more, like, you know, more politically controversial, or definitely more difficult to organize. You know, everyone learned skills. Obviously, that member Nadia was overwhelmed and extremely happy, but she also gained confidence, and she learned, she developed, and all of them developed together this kind of politics through action, rather than through us preaching to anyone, or you know, sharing a reading list, or any of those things. This comes from, you know, this comes from a tradition that I was previously involved in trade unions. Again, when workers find their political direction through action rather than through preaching, which is what happens on, you know, many corners of the left. And that was the idea pretty much behind Corporation Town.